Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Welcome to another Findmypast live broadcast. It's not Friday, it's Wednesday, middle of the week. So we've got a subject in mind. We're going to be doing questions and answers, genealogy questions, anything you can think of, then bring to the table and hopefully we'll have a solution. It's lovely that, of course, always there are people in here too that have their own ideas and possible answers. So it's great to see everyone working together on some of these questions too. So don't be afraid. I see everyone saying hello. I see Rosie, Anya, Linda, and see saying it's Drie here in Fife. It's not so bad in Edinburgh. And I'm enjoying slowly the plants that are taking over my office as they are growing over time. And I don't know when they're going to stop. So eventually, if you see me poking through all these different leaves, you'll know what's happened. But as long as they stay alive, we should be okay. I'm enjoying the fresh air. I see Somerset. I see Sue in Guildford. I see Roz. I see Ellen. Oh dear, thunderstorm advisory in Roscoe. I see you all coming in, so that's great. I see lots of you there, Jane as well. I see we've got a large number of people ready. So we've got some questions that have been submitted in advance, which is fantastic. So we've got those ready to go. But if you have any other questions or thoughts, then drop them into the comments. There's no end moment, so keep going. Hi, Heather. I'm in Edinburgh as well. So we're looking at the same sky. And hi, Karen, as well. Melbourne. So you're coming from all over the world. Oh, great. We've got America. We've got Britain. We've got Utah as well, Roxanne. We've got Torquay. Diane, nice to see you popping in from holiday. Wales now. England, Wales, Scotland, Australia, France. Oh, it is truly an international community, isn't it? It's brilliant. And yes, if you have questions, drop them in. If you haven't, don't worry. Hopefully some of these tips will be applicable to yourself and your family history journey, maybe give you some ideas. But if not, then hopefully they'll be interesting enough to at least keep that hour and keep you out of trouble, which, of course, we never need that because you're genealogists, so you're never in trouble. I know that for a fact. So let's take a look at some of the questions that we've had in advance. I see more people from Edinburgh. It seems that we're almost a little group of our own. That's fantastic. Hi, Louise. I'm sure at some point I've been talking to Ellie about perhaps doing something special in Edinburgh, like a little walk around Greyfriars Cemetery or something together in form of one of our live broadcasts, maybe telling some of the stories or doing something like that. So that might be really exciting to do at some point. We might have to look into that. But yes, I'm sure some of you will already know some of those stories. But let's take a look at what we've got. So I'm going to open up our thing. So we've got a first question came from Sadie. So she's trying to research early 1650 emigrants to Virginia as indentured servants. They believe they were connected to Martin Parish in Wiltshire, now in Hampshire. They're trying to find manor records for that time period, but don't know the name of the manor holder. Any suggestions and any hope for finding emigration records for Southampton for that time? So there are a few things to unpack in this, I think. So first of all, if they're indentured servants, we have to think about that process of indentured servitude. Between a half and 2/3 of the colonists that went to America between the 1630s and the Revolution were indentured. And it doesn't mean that those people have come from a local manor. They could, perhaps, but they could really have come from anywhere. And even the ship's captains at some point were offering this free passage in exchange for that indenture, and they would sell the indenture to someone on the other side. So there's a chance that you're looking perhaps in the right place, but also maybe the wrong place. So maybe other places to look. So don't be wedded to this idea that maybe from the manor. And in terms of passenger lists, in terms of anything that you can find, 1890 is the big year for us when it comes to leaving the UK, because that's the year that the Board of Trade asked for a second copy of these records to be given to the government. And that means that we then have that second copy. Before then, they were kept by various individuals for ship's captains and so on, but there was no incentive or inclination or reason to keep them really, other than any kind of internal company reasons. So a lot of those have now just no longer survived. But there is a small collection that might be of use, and it's worth a go. It's about 20,000 records, just over, But of course, there were far fewer passages at this point, so it might still be really useful. It's helpful. It's on our website. We got it from the Findmypast. We got it from the National Archives in London. It's called Early Emigration from Britain, 1636 to 1815. That collection is really worth looking. It's some original records scanned from paper. They're scanned in colour. They're beautiful to look at. And they might be the way in. There's a big collection of those people in there. You can see some of them are migrating, some are traveling to different parts of the world, the country. It's a really interesting record collection and really worth looking at. So that is where I would look. Outside of that, yes, you might not find the passage leaving. But also, and this goes for passenger lists across the years, remember that usually when you've got a leaving journey, you've also got an arrival. And on that arrival, you may find some more detail because people usually are more interested in people arriving than people leaving. So in the US, they start a little later than this. We're not really going to find anything at this point. But if you're looking for other migrant ancestors, then be aware that there are two sides to every journey. You've got the departure and the arrival. And that arrival may give you much more information. So look for both. If you know the departure, you've got the ship, you've got some details. You've also, perhaps if you're not sure if this person is your person, go and look at the arrival and it will give you more detail. And that extra detail might be the key to unlocking what we're going for. So really, really useful when you find those. So that would be what I would do there, and that would hopefully help you out there. There's a question from Tonazin. I hope I got that right. With a name like Myko, I should be very good at pronouncing very seldom heard names, but I do apologise if I've not quite got it there. She has a great-grandmother, Mary Walsh, baptised in 1843 in Ireland, married in 1873 in Melbourne in Australia, her home state. She's been looking for a passage out on a ship from Ireland around the 1860s, but there are around about 20 other Mary Walshes arriving in Melbourne in the 1860s. How can she find which one of those 20s is her great-grandmother Mary Walsh? Her death certificate in 1898, age 55, filled out by her husband, states 32 years in Victoria, giving approximate arrival of 1866, but there are still quite a few Mary Walsh arrivals in 1866 to Melbourne. So there are a few different ways to approach this. This is one of those things that happens to all of us when we have a number of possible ancestors and we don't know which one is ours. And people could plausibly grab any one of those and say, that's mine. You have to really take a step back and look at each and be prepared to start working on the tree of all of these people to see what happens to them. Maybe if you find the ages in these things, different passenger lists at this kind of point vary wildly in what data they contain. And so for an Australian passenger list, I don't think you get that much information. You might get the age, I think. But as we see what's in there, you've then got to try and work out, say, okay, what happened to the other Mary Walshes in this area? Which ones died? Which ones carried on? Which ones went on? And see if you can connect them to those Mary Walshes in the passenger lists and see what else you can find. Use every piece of the record that you've got in front of you. Use all of the passenger list information and see what's there. And when you've got some information back in Ireland, so you've got a baptism, you've got 1843, then you should maybe start working forwards as well in Ireland to see if your Mary is still in Ireland at certain points. So you can guarantee that they're not some of the earlier Mary Walshes, and just try and narrow things down one by one and just chip them away. It's one of those things that might take you a bit more time because you've got more, but as this is, one of your ancestors, it's a direct one, working through 20 individuals, knowing that eventually, because one of them is your ancestor, you'll get there. There's quite a big reward at the end of it, so it's worth doing. So it takes a bit of time, but that's what I would do. I would start separating things out, trying to use process of elimination, use other records to narrow the span of possible records that I'm looking at, and that counts on both sides, both in Ireland and in Australia, and try and just place everyone that's left so you can say, okay, it can't be this one, it can't be this one, until you've only got maybe one. And that will be the one. So hopefully that helps. But it is a case of a process of elimination when it comes to that one. So you've got some lots of questions coming in as well live. So I see on you're saying Grey Fires is great. Always ends up showing people around it when back home. The whole of the Royal Mile, fantastic history. Maybe you should have to do that as well. Sarah has asked, could we please advise how to locate birth details of a daughter born of British parents in Belgium in in the 1890s. So there is a set of overseas births and baptisms that might be worth looking at, because those are the children of British citizens. They are on Find My Past, and that is where I would look, because all through the period of civil registration, you'll find the same records there. They give an index reference, and with that index reference, you can then order a certificate just like you can as if they were born in Leicester or Ipswich or Luton or anywhere else in Britain. So that's the way to go about that one, I think, and that'll be where I would look straight away. That would be hopefully the answer to that. That's a nice and simple one, I hope. See what we've got. So Sue has found a newspaper article on the death of her 2 times great-grandfather. Mentions he was an earth warner. Nothing to do with surname with the Kildare Hunt. Any idea what that is? Many have tried to help, but can only find other mentions. No description of what it entails. Earth warner. That's one I've not heard before. So I'd want to throw that one open to everyone and see if maybe anyone else here, as there is a group of us, a large group of us that might have heard of that, because it's great when we can work together, and no one knows everything. So definitely, if anyone has any ideas, then I'd love to hear that. An earth warner is a very interesting thing. I wonder if it could be something else like an earth warmer, but that's not really. Oh, it's a strange one. That's interesting. So I'd love to see what people think. That's a good one. Deb has lots about a brother and ancestor up to 1845 in London or Middlesex. Then he simply falls off the radar, but no death found, no burial record, can't find his marriage around about 1843 in Middlesex. What happened to him? If he died, his death was recorded somewhere, but not located in the usual sources. Well, I mean, there are people that died and weren't identified, or people that moved away and changed their name, people who migrated. There's lots of different reasons, but if we're looking at 1845, it might be more prudent to start digging into their life, start working out what they did for a living, all the bits that you know. I know you've got the 1841 census and you've got an address. Next, look at the 1851 census, see who's in that property, see if it's a member of the same family or someone completely new. Perhaps when you know about their occupation, start looking at their occupation records or information about what that occupation did. Perhaps look at a local gazetteer from this kind of point as well to find out if something happened to that occupation and those people may have moved elsewhere. That can happen, perhaps if they worked on the docks and the docks happened to close or didn't expand as quickly as other docks and elsewhere or something like that. At this point as well, you know, we can't discredit the idea of migration or something like that. And there are lots of other possible things to go for. I think in terms of looking for a marriage, it looks like you've got a year already, Deb. So it'd be interesting to know where you got that from. And I'm guessing that might give you some help. There are always, as we mentioned a few times, and I always find really helpful, wildcards are useful depending on the name. Remember to use wildcards to see if there's a mistranscription or something like that that might get you a little bit further. I'm looking at the moment for some Simkins in Willenhall in Staffordshire, and they're Simkin in my family, but they're often Simkins, and I've also seen them as Semken and all kinds of things. So I use asterisks inside that, in between the S and the M, the K and the N, and I put one on the end just in case, so get rid of the fact there's an N or just an N and an S. So they're really helpful, really useful. So use those as well, and hopefully maybe one of those will help. I think the issue with that is it's similar to the comment we had from Tonzin about not knowing who's their ancestor. When you've got so many possible ancestors and we need to find out which one's yours, you've got to lay a few out and start working through it. If there are absolutely no answers at all, then that's interesting in itself, and that's something that bears investigating. So there's got to be something, and there's definitely a story there. It's just a case of digging in and getting a bit deeper into it. So I would say, Deb, to start looking at, you know, what that marriage might be, where it might be. If it's not there, that might also suggest that they've gone elsewhere. If they've definitely gone completely, that's interesting and strange, but definitely look at the census and the following year as well to see who's in that property, and then start broadening as well. When you're looking in the 1851 census, look nationwide for people with the same name, see how many appear, and see for those variants as well, to see if maybe there's someone lurking just beneath the surface. And you can even use place of birth, but use county of birth, or use perhaps something broader, use a keyword of London, see what comes back, or nothing at all, just to see. Keep experimenting by chopping and changing, intermingling the different criteria that you're using to see what might turn things around. Really, really helpful if you can do that, and hopefully that will get you that missing uncle. So fingers crossed. Let's see what we have here. Right, we've got a few more. So Marianne has said, how do we find out? James Calder, a farmer, Calder briefly in Petty, Inverness, who had children in Petty, 1800 to 1811. No baptism, no marriage, no death in the area, and disappeared before the 1841 census. No idea about any info on him. The children's baptism is the only proof of him. Okay. I would say at this point, you have got a great start in the new records that we've released for Scotland, the Scotland parish marriages, Scotland parish death and burials, particularly because they include things like irregular marriages, which happen fairly often in the Highlands. So you might find there was no marriage ceremony. These people just declared that they were married. They put their hands together. They got two witnesses and said, we're married now. And that meant there was no marriage ceremony, but they might be caught and put into the Kirk sessions. And then those registers we've indexed, and you can find those online, search for those names. So start with that, and that might help you for a marriage, and it's worth a go. There's also, when we're looking for deaths, there are records of mort cloths and ringings of the burial bell, which aren't traditional burial registers. We have them as well in these new collections. These are, in some cases, desperately poor areas, and these people may not have been able to afford, perhaps if there was a bad harvest or something like that, the money to have a proper burial. So that's another reason why you might not find them. However, also, I would say at this kind of period in particular, take a look at our Catholic records for this area. We've got a huge collection of those, twice as many as anyone else online. And those Catholic records are a great assistance. They are scanned originally. So you've got these wonderful colour copies, and your ancestor may be Catholic instead. So that might be one way of taking a look, and hopefully that you might find some names there. Keep broad. Don't assume your ancestors' religion, particularly in Scotland, particularly in this point from about 1560 all the way up to the modern day. Anything like that, there were, I think the last count I did, there was about 27 different religions that have existed or do exist, and all of those are places your ancestors may be found. So keep broad when it comes to that, and hopefully that will help you. Claire has asked, where could I find information of migration to Australia around 1885? We recently published a massive collection of Australian passenger lists. I would start with those. We collated together all the passenger lists from all of the different local states, and then also national records as well, to give you the best chance of finding some records. Many of them have images. They are beautiful. Take a look at that collection on Find My Past. It's in our all record sets. That will hopefully really, really help you there. I see Beth saying that she's managed to find some family members on passenger lists. Really interesting to find out where they were going and leaving. And there is a lot in that information as well. I like to put it all in the timeline of someone's family tree, so I know where they are. And it might mean later on that they're not a particular person in a different record, and it might give me some more clues for later on. And there we have Niall, who's in our comments, wonderfully helping, has passed this on for you, Claire. Australia, Inward, Outward, and Coastal Passengers is the name. And there's a link there for you as well. So Martin has said here, hello from sunny France. I'm glad it's sunny where you are, Martin. Trying to break down a brick wall with the parents of John Barnes, born 1767 in Fritchley in Derbyshire, non-conformist baptism. His father was also a John, I believe died in 1771. His widowed mother went on to remarry William Annabel. The parents were married in 1765 in Critch, Derbyshire. After that, the trail goes cold. I can't find a definitive birth for John Sr. There are several possibilities, including the baptism in Ashbourne and it does cut off, so I'm not too sure about what else was there. But I would say for this, the first thing we can look at, and we can say that we know they're non-conformist already. So you've got half of the battle done for you. You know that you're probably not looking in the established church, with the exception of the fact that between the mid-1700s and the early 1800s, the law was that anyone who was non-conformist, apart from Quakers and Jews, had to be married in a Church of England church. So that means you may find 2 marriages for your family because of the fact that they would have their official marriage, and then they would also have their real marriage back in their own faith when they got back home. So that's one thing to look out for. And at this kind of point, you are in the right sort of area for that. So there's that to see. In terms of the birth, if you're looking at baptism at this point, you depending on which faith they are, I would look a little bit about the history of those faiths and see what state that religion was at the time, whether you knew they may be being baptized into that faith at that point, or perhaps they converted later on, maybe if there was a presence in that area. Again, gazetteers usually tell you which faiths are strong in which areas and how congregations they have. That might lead you to records of a particular congregation. Sometimes earlier non-conformist records don't survive because those people were often persecuted. So keeping a list of all those members is not usually too safe, because that's a big list of people that need to be often persecuted. So it's a very dangerous thing to do. But I would start with that. So I can't see, and maybe Martin, if you make a point and comment the faith that they are that you know, then that would help, because it may be written and it's cut off in this thing, but that would help too. But I would say definitely we've got those marriages at this point we can look for. They will hopefully give you some more information. The witnesses as well are always really useful. They could be relatives, they could help too. And then of course we've got trying to find baptisms from these different non-conformist faiths as well, so that can be helpful. Linda has had notifications to go 8 generations back. Pioneers traveling to Salt Lake City in 1846. Anything else that they can look at to embellish or prove information on Find My Past? They have the ship arrival. It would depend. I would say Find My Past is really good at this point for the point before they leave for the United States. You've got a real start of the Victorian era. And the thing about the Victorian era is that it's full of people writing things down. There's a great increase in literacy rate, and there's a great need for the government to know what the people of Britain are doing. So there are lots and lots of records that are created at this point. And so there are probably a great deal of records that you can find in Britain to start off with, starting with the 1841 census and then moving around. Depending again on what your ancestors did, you might find them in some electoral rolls. Very early ones would mean they would have to be fairly respectable in the community. And then there are other records that we could look at as well, perhaps guild records, trade records, postal directories. All these different things might also help at this point. So those are what I'd start. And then before they convert and before they travel to Salt Lake City, then you've also got the idea of the Church of England baptisms that might be able to be found, Church of England marriages, burials. They also might be able to help you too. So I would say for Find My Past, the value is in getting back to the home country, and when you're there, there's so much to find. So that's what I would hopefully point you to. I see here we've got a few different bits here. Oh, Nyla said we finally found something that Myko doesn't know the answer to with the Earth Warner. There's plenty of things I don't know the answer to. I think that's very, very fair. But yes, there's a big, big step. And I see some great comments from other people as well. I said it's great when we're all helping each other. I see Nyla is very adeptly adding in extra information for the stuff we're talking about. So that link there is brilliant for helping with wildcards. I will talk about wildcards until the day I die. They are one of the best tools in your family history arsenal. Definitely make sure you know how to use them. And that blog will really, really help you. Audrey has mentioned when we talked about overseas births, the collection on Find My Past, the armed forces and overseas births and baptisms includes some Foreign Office registers from British consulates where you can see the actual images as well as those ones you have to order. So take a look at those sources. Really, really helpful. Thank you very much. And Audrey, I see Denise saying she's got Simkin ancestors. Oh, mine at the moment, Denise, are Simkin. So maybe we're distant cousins, but maybe not so much. And I said it is one of those things that every time we do a broadcast, I find a new cousin. So hi, Denise. But let's see how we go. And Janine has said this video didn't pop on my Facebook feed. They wonder why no notice, because they want to remedy that. I would say that's probably a Facebook thing. I'm not sure. But at the start of the week, we usually publish what's going on and when. So if you take a look, that should help you and should give you a bit of a guide as what's going on. Outside of this week, there's also Jen Baldwin on Friday. You haven't got 4 doses of me. I've got to rest my voice. You've had 3, and Jen will be very happily taking the Friday, and she'll have some great things to share as well, talking about our great new records. I think there are some good ones this week as well, so look forward to that one. I see Carol has hit a brick wall in the late 1600s. Husband's family tree. In the Bamborough parish records, there are 2 sets of people with the same names. The name of his ancestors' parents on the baptism register. Can't work out which of the 2 are my husband's forebears. This happens a lot. We mentioned a bit about doing multiple trees and working out with multiple families to see which one is our ancestor. The big thing to do here is to start making 2 couples. We know that there are 2 couples. We can't get away from that. We know one of them is ours. We know one of them is someone else. We need to then take every bit of information we can and start to work out who's left. It's the 1600s. We can't look at censuses, but we can look at other things. We can look at all the bits of information from parish registers. We can see occupations. We can look at residences. Maybe one lives in High Hill. Maybe one lives in Low Hill. All these different things that might go, okay, right, the 2 couples are in different places. Then we look at the children's baptisms in this period and say, okay, maybe if they're in different occupations, one says this person is a joiner, one person says this person is a painter. All these things might be helpful. We lay everything out, all the children, we lay the couples out. And also, when you lay out all the children to people born of these 2 parents, make a note of the baptism dates and the years and things like that. Sometimes you get the birth dates, which is even better, because, of course, you won't have someone being born less than 9 months before the last one. So that also means when you've got a couple and you're trying to untangle them, which is something I did on the Isle of Arran with a couple, both called, I think, John Curry and Margaret Cook, and trying to move them apart is when you realise, hang on, there's 6 months between the birth of these children. This doesn't make sense. And then you realise you can split them out and you can find there are actually 2 couples here. And that's one of the big things to do as well. So take every piece of record you can and start working through. Even look for burial records of these 2 people, because you might find one couple died earlier and then people continue having children. And so you know then that these are product of one of these couples. It's again a logic puzzle. It's laying things out and trying to work through as we go. So that is one of the big things to do. There's never any harm in working on someone else's family tree for a little while, even though it's not a friend of yours or anyone you know, because that little bit of work that you do is essentially working on your tree at the same time by ruling out or ruling in records that might be yours. So don't ever be afraid of setting up a new tree and working on just a little family, a tiny little group of people, and just working out what could be theirs and try and build a timeline. And then you'll know for sure when you lay them side by side who is who. If you make a separate tree on Findmypast, for example, I have my main family tree. I make this little snub, this little, let's call it a shrub, and we'll build that up. And then I can open a new window and lay these 2 individuals, 2 couples side by side and just look at them both and say, okay, does this make sense? And start to work out in that way. So that's what I would do with there, and that would be really, really helpful. Sally has asked, are there any papers or records on early Quakers? There are. And we've got a massively wonderful collection of Quakers in Ireland as well, very useful. And Niall's put in, there's a big list of the Quaker records too, really, really helpful. And really, really good collection we have of different Quakers. Mary is looking for a murder-suicide in Leith, 1976. Has the death register for both parties. I'd like to find more. Not found in newspaper cuttings. Is there a coroner record, and where do I find such information? I would say for that, if you've been to see these or if you've seen anything, you might find that there's they say an RCE, Register of Corrected Entries. You might find details of the Procurator Fiscal's report attached to that when you look at that online. But it's quite recent, so I'm not sure what the rule is in terms of that. I would say it's probably not it's not public information in the same sense yet. There's privacy to be concerned about. For newspapers, there are a host of modern newspapers that are being added all the time to Findmypast. Modern newspapers are a little bit more difficult to get hold of because we have to agree different rights and different permissions to make sure we can do that. So they take a little bit longer, but there are lots on already, and there are more coming all the time. Don't be ashamed of looking at newspapers that are hundreds of miles away from where you're thinking of, because these things can be published in one place and they can be reported from hundreds of miles away. So you might find your ancestors in a Lincoln newspaper, even though you're talking about Leith. And, there's lots of different ways. So take a look at that. The British Newspaper Archive or our Findmypast newspapers, they go right up to modern day, and keep looking as well. If they're not there now, they might well be in the coming weeks and months. Karen has said, does a premium membership give me access to USA records? If it's the top level subscription, it gives you access to all of the records on the site worldwide. So that's the one to look for if you want to make sure you've got absolutely everything. Karen has said it wouldn't be a fair show without Myko finding a family. This is something that I will never understand. And I'm sure there's somewhere a bit of a list where I think people are just taking straws to be my relatives. I see Beth is saying that we all know I like to find potential family members, working out how and if they're related to me. I think, I like a mystery and I like a challenge, but it is a strange one. So Patricia doesn't yet have a connection to me. Give it time. I'm sure it will happen. And Sylvia also, neither do I. But Sylvia, if you remember, we did have Howarths that were in similar places until we looked and investigated. So there was a close call. So I think we've still got some more to look for. And see, Sylvia is saying she's got about 3 John Wilkinsons and Elizabeth and Bettys, and she's been trying to unpick them for years, all around 1790. So I'm guessing doing the same thing that we just talked about, laying things out. I know Sylvia's a good genealogist, so splitting those families. We're doing a bit on their family tree and working through that's the best way to work out what to do with that. Matthew's a really good point here. Had some difficulties with Dixons in Kent. Found them through, though, with the name spelled Dixon with a CK and Dixon with an XS. Earlier it was Dixon with a Y and Dixon with 2 S's. That X might have been put as a CK or just a K in some records. It is an interesting one, and that is why those wildcards are really, really useful. Richard makes a good point as well. For the late 1600s, there are half tax records, exemption certificates as well, and association oath rolls. They can sometimes help separate people with the same name. They can give you some residences. I like protestation returns. I like oath rolls. I love apprenticeship records. There's everything you can think of that will fill this gap. It's very hard when we look back and we assume there are only parish registers to look at, but there are a host of earlier records. And I think at some point we might have to do a presentation on records from the 1500s to the 1700s or to the Victorian point, and those more interesting niche things to try and broaden the family tree and do something. Because the Victorian era is almost, I don't want to say easy. I'm going to touch wood here because I'm a bit worried. If I say that Victorian research is easy, then of course I'm going to get stuck with the next question. But definitely there are some great records in Georgian Britain and great records in earlier Britain as well, Tudor and Stuart. And so it's not as bleak as it may seem. So definitely, Richard, it's a good point, and there will be some help. And Sally has said she did some work on a friend's tree. He's just recently subscribed to Findmypast. He now spends ages researching, and he's never available for a coffee nowadays. Well, why not, Sally? Now we can have people over or anything else. Go round to him, or go around. He come round to you and make a coffee and sit and watch one of our Findmypast videos. That way, you're getting the best of both worlds. You're getting Findmypast. You're getting to hang out with your friend, and then also we're going to get some Findmypast knowledge out of it. So that seems like a great thing here. Susan as well, encouraging that, and can't emphasize the importance of building a tree sideways, siblings and their descendants, especially with Scottish naming patterns. As Myko just mentioned, 2 names the same, born 6 months apart. I have the same problem in a certain parish in Staffordshire, in Darlaston, where I have Duffields as far as the eye can see, and I'm sure they're all related. There are a few miles away as well, but they're not very creative when it comes to names. And all of these Duffields, there seem to be so many born about the same time, cousins born within 3 months of each other often. And trying to lay out who we've got and who's your own ancestor is a bit of a nightmare until you do, as you say, Susan, lay things out and make sure you've connected everyone to the place that you think they're there. So, you've caught my attention with the first 2 words, MJ. Italian ancestry. Have a grandfather who came to New York from Italy. Can't find where he was born, but have his death record. He died in 1918. His birth just says Italy, no town or province. Can you help me? Yes, MJ. So first of all, I would start with the US censuses. So in there, you should get, in the different ones, particularly 1910 and 1900, a bit of detail about when your ancestor arrived in the US, and that will be really helpful. because on that, we mentioned earlier, if you were here at the start, about how passenger lists, passenger arrivals will give you lots of information. If he arrived later, I think from around about 1902, perhaps 1906, if I remember rightly, there are information not only from which province someone was from, but which address they're going to, who they know in the US, what they do for a living, how much money they're carrying with them, and all this extra information that can really help to know that not only that's your guy, but also where they came from. Because in Italy, in Italian research, the one thing you need more than anything, if you can get this, then you are guaranteed a happy time, is the comune, the town that your ancestor is from. If you can get that, the parish sort of thing, then you are in luck, because Italian research is not hard. It's just very formulaic, but you need that one bit of information. Otherwise, you have to start far away and go through. I just helped one of my distant cousins' wives, who's also part Sicilian, and their grandfather is from a place in Sicily, in Palermo. And Palermo is made of a large number of different comune altogether, different parishes and towns together, maybe about 30. And we knew how old he was, and we knew everything, but we didn't know which one. So it was a case of going through every single one, every single year index, until we found that name. And luckily there was only one. It was a fairly rare enough name, but now we have details of his birth, details of his parents, and those birth records will give you lots of information, and we could go back another generation really easily. So definitely start with the US Census. It will tell you which year they came in. Take a look. Also, it will tell you if they're naturalized. If they naturalize, you'll see more information on a naturalization record, but the passenger list would be the first place to go. And I would look at that. If you can get that year of arrival, start looking at those. Start looking at New York passenger arrivals, but don't refuse Boston. Don't refuse other cities as well. They may have started there and moved to New York, but more likely, I would say, that if they came to New York and they stayed there, they probably arrived in New York. So take a look at those, and hopefully that will get you there. So thanks very much for that one, MJ. I'm seeing lots and lots of comments here. I see everything going through. I see. Oh, Cindy's found an ancestor's sibling who married a lady from Delray. Well, I have my ancestors, so we never know. Well, Cindy, so you'll be joining the rest of us as all happy cousins here. And of course, there is a great collection of Dalrai burials on Findmypast because of our lovely volunteers that have been transcribing and my vested interest of having those records online. And so those Dalrai burials really help me, and anyone who has ancestors in Dalrai, definitely take a look. They're in our modern and civil Scottish burials, and we've got some great things there. And so this is fast becoming the 6 Degrees Myko Clelland game. Audrey hasn't found a connection yet, but she did meet me on the first day I started working at Findmypast. Does that count? I think that does. I think we've been through a lot, Audrey. That was the 30th of May, 2012. I remember it like it was yesterday. I didn't have any grey hairs, and I was full of hope and promise. And I now have many more grey hairs, and I have much more hope and promise because I've seen the great potential that family history has. Oh, yes. So Karen said, Arlene, apprenticeship records for a tailor around the 1880s in Dumfriesshire. There would be. I would say that you would be looking for, well, it would depend partially if it was a formal or an informal apprenticeship. If you just worked with someone and it was a little bit less formal, then less so. The tax that was required for apprenticeships ended in the early 1800s, so it's not there. But you still get these apprenticeships going on, and you get them listed in guild records, things like that. And Burgess lists will often tell you a little bit more. For Dumfriesshire, they would probably be looking at records in Dumfries, and I think the Ewart Library might have some. I think they even have an online search for some trade records. So I would take a look at that, Karen. That might help you. And I'm sure to get a little bit into that as well, Karen. I might have a look for myself and see if I can find something for you. But there definitely are a few things there. And Richard's got some more tips as well for the coroner records we talked about. You can contact the coroner's office. Some from this date can be held in local archives. There's a Gibson's Guide on coroner's records. It's a little outdated now, and sometimes regulations mean that some records are destroyed after a certain period of time. In Scotland, that's the Procurator Fiscal, I think. And they are sometimes in the Sheriff Court, I believe. So there are some records. I think those ones aren't public so much because they're so recent for the times that you're looking. But definitely, again, always everywhere you think there might be records, find them, look, search everywhere. It's all you can really do, because it is really, really important to make sure you've had an exhaustive search. If there's something on there that you are missing, then you haven't done a lot. And I like to make a big spreadsheet, a list. And I know someone emailed me a while ago and asked for a sort of a copy of the spreadsheet I use, and I just make them as I go. But it was just, I say, okay, well, when someone's born, you've not just got the birth, you've got the baptism, you might have a birth notice in the newspaper, you might have other records that will fill in these gaps. When someone dies, there's a veritable shed load of different records that might be included. So you have the death, you might have, I would say, a post-mortem or something like that. You might have an inquiry from a coroner. You might have a death notice. You might have an obituary. You might have probate. You might have a burial. You might have a monumental inscription. All of these things should be looked for, and all of them might be helpful, might give you some more information. So it's about adding that thing here. So Cindy is looking at Birmingham in the 1901 census. My family's on Wellington Street, but they're in the middle of the row of houses listed at number 1, top view. There are 3 households with that address. Is that an alley? I find that, first of all, the place I would look is Google Street View. It's a great thing where you aren't in the particular place and you want to take a look at what a place looks like. If, as I imagine in Birmingham, particularly 1901, the buildings that you're looking at do not survive, you'll probably be able to notice by the age of the buildings that are around there. So that will give you a first clue. When you see that, then you can start looking. I like to Google for old pictures of certain places. I will look for the street name and the town, and I will just look for that and see what comes back. And sometimes you'll find old pictures of these particular streets, and that can be helpful and useful. But when we look at 1901 and the Victorian era and all these different things, there's one clever thing to look for in a census, and it's a little line that you'll find, a little sort of slash you'll see across. 1 means that you've got a different family in the same household, and then 2 means you've got a completely different household. So that's what you need to look for. If you want to see if there were 3 households in that particular building, then you can see that 3 families. You can look for that 1 line or 2 lines, and that will hopefully give you that bit of division. So that's what I would look for there. But it's quite common that you may find multiple families in one place, particularly in particular areas where people were, labourers or anything like that, working on the docks, working on the canals. They may not have been able to afford their own place. This is a period of mass urbanisation. People were coming in from around the world and around the country, and they just got wherever they could sleep, and then they hoped to make their fortune. So they may have come from the Black Country, for example, moving into Birmingham, and they just need somewhere, so they may have shared with other places. So it's really, really a big thing to look for and to make a note. And that's why we say look at everything on a record, whether it's a census, parish record or more. Every little bit, every single pen stroke might help you too. Beth loves going sideways on her family research. Knowing the wider family members helps to identify the correct family connections. I know there are sort of 3 different ways to do family history. There are looking at your pedigree, all your direct ancestors only, and going all the way back. And then there's looking at your direct ancestors, their spouses, and then all of their children. So you end up going sort of like this, and you have more and more, and you end up sort of branching back downwards, and you have a nice, I would say, a square, like a box, if you're doing it with everything going well. And then the other one is when you start, then you just enjoy the chase, and you then say, well, okay, well, I'm going to look for my uncle's spouse's great-grandfather's wife's nephew's brother, and go for there and just enjoy building and adding and keep going. And they're all fine. Do what makes you happy, but there's definitely some satisfaction. I know my tree is my it's my blood relatives and their spouses, and then I work downwards because these are all my cousins, 5th cousins, 6th cousins, and I can then tell more of a story. I might see a photo, I might be able to see a bit of a family resemblance, all that thing. I think that's really exciting. So that's what I like to do as well. Linda's Italian ancestor arrived before 1820. Very inconvenient and also very rare, Linda. Really interesting to see that. Back in the 1820s, those people that were migrating were quite often very, very skilled workers. They were artisans, often from very few parts of Italy, Como and around Parma and around Lucca, and they were often barometer makers. They made the different artifacts that you use for ships and for houses, and then also stucco plaster figurine makers. One thing that they often did was they were seasonal. If you were looking in Britain or anything like that, they would come over and they would then sell their wares and go back. And they often came from the north of Italy, and they would make these. And this was particular in the early 1800s because these plaster figurines, we were at the point when everyone knew the story of Lord Nelson and Wellington and everything else. They knew about all these heroes. They heard about them. Not many people bought newspapers, but everyone heard the stories and everyone wanted to know about this stuff. This was the era of the nation state. And so this was propaganda in its first time. But everyone then wanted a Napoleon, not Napoleon, a Wellington or a Nelson or anything in their home. And so they could do that. They can't afford marble figurines, but they could afford stucco plaster. And so it's just like plaster of Paris, we call it nowadays. And you would have this relatively cheap carved figurine of one of these great heroes of the day, or something beautiful, perhaps a beautiful woman holding flowers or anything you could think of, and a representation of maybe a famous work of art. And this is something that not just aristocrats could afford, and so they became hugely popular. And Britain was a bit obsessed with Italian style and fashion and art. It is a little bit now, even somewhat, but in that period it was hugely interested. If you were classy, you went to the opera. If you were classy, you liked Italian things. That was just one of those things. So people often had to kind of make themselves like Italian things. If they wanted to be a part of the middle classes, they had aspirations. They would have these things because it was what was expected. And so there's a great story in all of that. And so if you've got your ancestors coming before then, they may have traveled to make these things and they may have decided to stay. They may have fallen in love. There's some stories in that, definitely. And possibly take a look at very early citizenships as well in Britain. There aren't many, but definitely you might find someone there. The thing about early citizenship at this point is that citizenship gives you some benefits, but you don't really get those benefits at that point because almost no one could vote anyway. So there was no point in voting. There was nothing else. So a lot of people just didn't really bother. So it's still worth looking at, though. Sally has said, is it possible to print a copy of your tree in its entirety? Yes, there is a way to do that. There's a great company that I like to use. They're called My-History, and they will let you, they got a little online tool that lets you upload your Gedicom and you can print the whole thing on like a wall of wallpaper. You choose the quality of paper, you can do that. It's quite reasonable. And so I go to them whenever I want to get something done like that, because a tree is so complex. It's quite hard to represent. And I've done it, and I've got quite a complicated tree, let me tell you. It's more of a family web. And that is something that they managed to put together, and it worked, and it was quite interesting and great to unfurl. It's very, very large, but it's really interesting to look at, and they did it without a complaint. And you get to see what it looks like before you say you want to buy it as well. So that's really useful. So I would go there too, and that would be what I would do. So here we go. Bev has a tough question. Grandfather was born illegitimately with his younger brother 14 months apart. His biological father was married, I believe. The name of Henry John Kelly, so possibly Irish. Total brick wall. That sounds like something for DNA. It sounds like you might need to have some DNA tests and hope that you can get some more distant cousins, second cousins, third cousins, fourth cousins, and start to triangulate, start to group them together and clump them and try and work out where you can explain all of these different cousins, and look at the ones you can't explain and try and see if you can. Sometimes, again, there's nothing wrong with doing someone else's family tree for a little while. Work backwards on their family tree and see if you can connect these people together, and see then if you can see some names that keep appearing, and see then if you might be able to work that tree forward and find people in the right place at the right time. Really, really helpful to do that kind of thing as well. So it's a brick wall, but, and I've got a little bit of experience in this from personal thing, it is definitely not unassailable, and I think the answer is out there. It just, you have to do that wonderful thing that we can do now of combining paper and DNA. DNA is a great tool that we've put in, and that now as genealogists we have to use both. And we are stronger than ever for using both. If you use just one, then you are missing out, and if you use both, then you really have the best chance of finding different things. So here we go. What else have we got? I've So many coming through. Linda said from Como. Exactly. There we go. So I've told you the story of your own ancestor without noticing. And he was a carver and a gilder. So there we go. Carving and gilding, doing the plaster work, doing the artwork that all these British people were so keen on. So I didn't get to see these comments as they were coming in, but it's lovely that I was telling the story without seeing that that was the right thing there. So Sylvia's got a connection in her tree. She has a Garibaldi and a Mazzini Wilkinson. It was a big thing when Garibaldi came to Britain to visit. He was a worker's hero, and so all the places he went to, that he was given gifts, he was given swords, he was given freedoms of the city, all kinds of things. And so lots of people named their children after them. So it's one of those great things that shows a little bit about your ancestors' politics as well, because that usually would mean that you've got some early sympathies towards these kind of causes, and that can also tell you a little bit about your family. It's the same when you look at things like people being named after certain World War I battles and things like that. It may mean that they've got some connection to that battle, maybe a family member that was there or anything like that. So definitely something to look into. Let's have a look here. Lots of people here. So Anya has a family web as well. Coal miners, lots of intermarriage. It's very, very it's very interesting when you get these things that sort of loop around and go around, it's sometimes a little bit harder, particularly when you have people marrying and they're the same surname, because they're distant branches of the same family as well. So it makes it very, very difficult when you're on a family tree and it looks wrong because it looks like you've not put the mother's maiden name or anything in, and you go, it's right, no, it's definitely there, but that's the one of Fee saying, yeah, my tree is full of Findmypast members and cousins. It's true. It is. Eventually, we'll just publish it online and it will be the Findmypast tree, and then we'll all be there. And I see lots of this. It's great. And see, Linda, see you swapping notes as well. That's great. That's exciting. And then people saying other people are related to each other. That's great. I see a question here by Louise. Struggling to get any further back on her paternal side. Gone as far as her 4 times great-grandfather. And that's nothing to be sniffed at. So that's not bad. Don't do yourself down. I think you're doing well. Can't get any further. Do you have any ideas? William Griffiths, 1791 to 1869 in Rockerding Wood, Shropshire. So I would say that, first of all, we've got a wonderful collection of Shropshire parish records. Also, we're in Shropshire. Now, I only really know about Shrewsbury in Shropshire, so forgive me if I'm going to speak out of turn. I might be getting this slightly out of sorts, but we're right on the border with Wales, so don't discount records from the other side of the border. When you are closer to the border, you find often, I've got ancestors in Cheshire and Flintshire, and they just hop around. They move between, sometimes even very, very annoyingly, the parish that I'm looking at, actually the line between England and Wales goes right through the middle. And it seems that I've got ancestors that they're listed in Higher Kinnerton and Lower Kinnerton, and one is in Wales, in Flintshire, in Hope, and the other is in Doddleston, in Cheshire. And it's something where they could probably see each other, but they were in different countries, different parishes, and that makes searching very, very confusing, very difficult. So broaden things out. Broaden out and look at these surrounding counties and see if that will help you, because our ancestors didn't see the lines on a map. When you look at one of those maps and you see those big lines between counties and countries, they don't exist when you go and visit for real. And that's the problem, because people just don't really care and they'll just walk between, particularly as it's part of the same larger country, part of Britain, part of the United Kingdom. So there's no border, there's nothing else. And so it's just really, really easy for that to happen. So start with that. Start looking at our Welsh collection as well. And I think that might help you too. But we have a great collection of Shropshire parish records too. And there are some great Shropshire other records too, in all record sets, I think, from the same archive. So type in Shropshire in that all record sets and see what else comes back too. And I think there might be some more things for you as well, Louise. Let's see what else we have. I see everything coming through. So we've got 5 minutes left. We're still running through. So much to go. I'm hoping to try and get to as many as I can. Here we go. So Karen's got a good question. How can I ensure when an ancestor is mine when relying on parish records? If they've died before the census started, no way to cross-reference. Most of my brick walls, people having common names, and I just don't know if any of them are who I'm looking for. This seems to be the topic of the week, isn't it? So that's a big one. And I would say that the big thing here is to look at the other parts of the record. You've got in parish registers more than meets the eye, more that's on the surface. You've got witnesses, you've got details of residents, you've got occupations, you've got all these things. And in that parish, you can search and find people when you've got multiple people with that name. We've talked about this a little bit earlier about how you can sometimes build out those other people and see what happened to them as well. Maybe they died before your ancestor was born. Maybe there's a reason why they can't be your ancestor. Lay them out and just don't be afraid to work on other trees at the same time that all kind of connect. They might even be distant cousins to yours, so it's not wasted research, but it is really, really helpful to go for, and that can help a lot. My husband, this is from Kathy, 3 times great-grandfather, Mitchell Hayhurst, married Anne Whisker, daughter of James. Their marriage was in 1852 in Manchester. They had 1 child, but Anne sadly died, and my husband is a descendant from Mitchell's second marriage. Any connection to my whiskers? I think possibly. I think this is... It always happens, doesn't it? What a way to end a broadcast that... I mean... I wish that there was a way somehow that there was some agency or something that we were hiring people to do this, or so there was some explanation that made sense to any of this. And I promise to all of you that I'm not getting these people or prepping them beforehand or anything like this. These are all new people. But yes, Kathy, that's really interesting. That sounds like it might well be. James Whisker is the most common male name in that family for my branch. Also, Anne is quite common, and I've never seen a Whisker that says it's not come from this particular parish in County Down in Ireland and descended from this family of James's. So, yes, I'm really interested in finding out more about that, because I do have an Anne that I don't know what happened to. So perhaps we may have connected to my family. So welcome, Kathy, to the cousins. And it's great to have found something. And Patricia saying it's to start a club of people who aren't related to me. And so it's going to be smaller than the other group, I think. Oh, wow. So that's one. Another question from Susan. Any records for the Italians in Orkney? Prisoners of war. Been to the church and was told it was built by the Italians. Yes, there are records. The archive there in Orkney has a lot of records of those people who were there. They have photographs of all the people there as they were building it, and lots of their stories. Really interesting documents there. They're not online, but I would really recommend, if you've got an interest, then you can look at those at the Orkney Library and Archives. Worth taking a look. And Orkney is a beautiful place as well to go and see. And if you've seen that church, it is massively beautiful. It's worth taking a look at. If we can't go abroad, then I would recommend perhaps looking at those local places. And Orkney, you can do a lot worse than going to visit some of those wonderful islands. Also, I might be biased, but the Isle of Arran has a special part in my heart. So if you visit there as well, definitely say hello to all of my cousins, which is everyone on the island, and enjoy Scotland in miniature. But let's see, here we go. Matthew's got a good point about parish records. Wills can help to confirm people there. It's also worth looking at records in the equity courts, as these can often provide written pedigrees. Currently looking at some which help confirm theorised lines. Really good point, Matthew. We've got a great collection of wills from Shropshire and from other places as well. So I think we're mentioning Shropshire, but lots of national county collections. A will can give you such detail. Probate wills, huge, excellent thing to look at, and really, really, really exciting to see. So if you can get hold of wills, particularly love those original ones where you can see something written out in full. Wonderful will that we were looking at with some friends some time ago about an ancestor of mine, which was really detailed, gave you everything, gave you children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, brothers, sisters, their wives, their children. It was a massive document, told you where everyone lived, what they were doing. I loved it. And that's the sort of thing you can find with wills. So really good point, Matthew. That is great. So it looks like we have about a minute left. I'm seeing, lots and lots of people talking. Lots of people had a great time, it looks like. And I want to say, again, thank you very much. And I hope I got to as many questions as possible. Hopefully answered yours. If not, don't worry. We have these question and answer sessions every single month. So come back, ask these questions, and we will get to them. And also you have another chance to talk family history on Friday, where Jen will be doing the Fridays live, talking about our new records of this week, and also generally having a Find My Past and family history chat, which is always a bit more relaxed, a bit more low key, a bit more fun, and always an exciting time. I might tune in and watch myself because I do enjoy them too. But in terms of these question and answers, if you've got a new question or you think of one in the next week or two, then save it up, write it down, note it, and then we'll be back next month and we can go this again, and hopefully then we'll get that answer. And of course, there is always the Find My Past forum as well, where you can ask questions in the meantime. It has been lovely to spend an hour with you. Again, I'm always very, very happy that you choose to spend your hour hanging out with me in my little office here. And I'm just very excited that hopefully some of you will now find some new records or be able to get a little bit further. And it's not just thanks to me, it's thanks to everyone here who's been helping each other and talking. You're all wonderful, wonderful people. And if I could hug you all in safety, then I would, because you're all fantastic. So thanks very much for coming. And so thank you very much to Niall for moderating all these comments. And I do hope to see you again very soon. And take care and have a great week. And if I don't see you soon, then I'll definitely see you in a few weeks' time for some more Find My Past live broadcasts. Don't be a stranger. In bocca di lupo.